Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Friday, the 12th day of July, 2024. Let me tell you, the stories are coming fast and furious out there about Joe Biden and the problems he is causing as he's remaining as the candidate so far for the Democratic presidential nomination. Three stories we're going to look at. First, NATO leaders are alarmed and embarrassed by Biden, we are told. Number two, panic escalates on the left as Biden is now imperiling states that are usually solid Democratic. And finally, donors are threatening to freeze some $90 million if Biden is the candidate. These are just some of the many headlines in the aftermath of Joe's big boy press conference yesterday, where he introduced Zelensky as Putin and called Donald Trump his vice president. Now, there's also one important story from Israel that Benjamin Netanyahu is hardening his stance on certain issues in dealing with Hamas, which has a number of bleeding hearts worried it will ruin the deal. All right, it just sounds like there's chaos everywhere, which in a sense there is. We could talk about what's going on in France, elsewhere. But the bottom line is both Israel and the United States are in crisis modes right now. Let's get to the stories. First of all, headline number one, NATO. The summit swirls with rumors of foreign leaders alarmed and embarrassed by Biden. The annual NATO summit this week was marred by multiple reports of anonymous diplomats fretting that its host, Joe Biden, was mentally incapable of running the country and would soon vacate the presidency of NATO's most important country. Unnamed European officials described themselves as to political journalists as alarmed. In a report published on Thursday, while Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group, cited rumors that Biden had an episode which he did not recognize someone he was believed to know very well and would repeat himself often in interactions with other world leaders. Reports preceded rumors published in the DC outlet Axios that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a premier guest at the NATO summit, was watching with mounting concern the increasingly frenetic debate in America about Biden's capacity to fulfill his duties. Report preceded Biden referring to Zelensky as Russian President Vladimir Putin in a public engagement on Thursday. Later that night in a press conference, American media described as a big boy press conference, as he was expected to take questions, Biden referred to Vice President Kamala Harris as Vice President Trump, again concerning onlookers. Prior to those gaffes, however, NATO summit attendees were already speaking candidly of alarm surrounding Biden's mental state. It's a very weird feeling to be in Europe listening to the President of the United States, and you are more stressed about whether he will go off script than being excited to listen to the leader of the free world, someone described as a senior European diplomat told Politico in a report published on Thursday. You're worried if he knows which directions he's going, or whether he's going to fall, or whether he's going to forget it, or he'll say North Korea when he meant South Korea. It's just a weird experience. You can only imagine, can't you? You never know what's going to come moment by moment from the guy. Um, Again, Politico described European leaders at the summit as alarmed and increasingly concerned about both Biden and the potential return of former President Donald Trump to the White House, who prioritized confronting delinquent NATO countries about not meeting their defense spending thresholds they had committed to as part of the military alliance. Remember, that's one of the great things Trump did. I said, you need to pay up now. You're not meeting the defense spending thresholds. It's gone on too long. And what a great job. He forced them to pay up and pay their part because the U.S. is doing the heavy lifting in all of this. And they're supposed to pay their dues as we're helping them out. Anyway, this person, Bremer, speaking to MSNBC on Tuesday, said he found the atmosphere at the NATO summit similarly tense. Attendees at the summit reportedly said on one occasion Biden was not recognizing someone he knew quite well when he came up and introduced him, and kept repeating the same anecdote twice in an individual meeting. The concerns surrounding Biden diverting attention from particularly aggressive NATO summit declaration that condemned communist China and North Korea as threats, in addition to its usual commitments to confront Russia, is a far cry from the promises Biden made as a presidential candidate to restore global trust in America. And that's one of the sad things. We've been mentioning this over the last number of months, that our friends don't trust us, our enemies don't fear us, and the other countries think we're irrelevant. Biden campaign on restoring global trust in the United States, and has happened anything but that. And finally, it says political notice. One anonymous official at the summit lamented that Biden's potential shortcomings could hurt America's actions internationally. And this is, like we have said, our big fear. And they close with this line. We're really concerned that the world will essentially be leaderless for the next several months and that we don't know what comes after that. The official was quoted as saying, well, that's exactly the case. There's no leader here in the United States now, and we don't know what Vladimir Putin's going to do. Little rocket man in North Korea, Xi Jinping, the Ayatollahs. There's all kinds of things going on in the world that are dangerous, danger spots, horrifically dangerous spots. And yet there's no one there to confront it with a clear voice as a U.S. president usually has. And so we can understand why the NATO leaders were upset when they were there with Biden this week. All right, now not only we have this international problem, we also have this domestic problem that's going on. That's as far as the left is concerned, anyway. The New York Times panic escalates on the left as Biden imperils states that Democrats bank on. Panic is escalating on the left as President Joe Biden's candidacy is imperiling traditionally blue states, and there are no signs that he's willing to step aside for another candidate, the New York Times reports. Citing strategists, Democrats up for election, and local officials, the outlets Nicholas Nemas and Colleen Brown highlight in an article published Friday afternoon the political contours are shifting in states like Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Mexico, and Virginia. And these are solidly blue states, usually, but not anymore. Joe Biden at the helm. This comes on the heels of a political report indicating New York has suddenly morphed into a battleground state. This is backed up by polls conducted before Biden's abysmal debate performance on June 27th, which showed Trump within single digits of the president. The blue-leaning states are part of the beefy base of electoral votes Democrats bank on in a given presidential election before focusing on the battleground states. Biden's slip in these states have also coincided with an effort of former President Donald Trump to expand the universe of battleground states to include the blue leaners, as he first told Breitbart News he would in December. So you've got panic internationally, you got panic on the left here in America. And again, even on the right, there's panic because we don't have anybody in the White House who's leading anything, who's got any, real leadership skills seemingly left in him. And we're wondering what will happen with respect to the world, the bad guys in the world, Putin, Xi Jinping, Little Rocket Man, the Ayatollahs, there's many of them out there. And so there's a concern across the board because of his present mental state. Now, this has led, and this is not surprising, headline number 3, donors for pro-Biden super PAC reportedly planning to freeze $90 million if Biden remains on the ticket. Donors have reportedly informed Future Forward, the largest Biden super PAC, that if President Biden remains on the Democratic Party's presidential ticket, roughly $90 million in donations will be frozen. Two anonymous sources who are familiar with the conversations told the New York Times that several 8-figure commitments were among the frozen donations. One advisor for Future Forward, which is led by Chauncey McLean, a former Democrat Party operative, reportedly told the outlet that they expected the donors who had frozen their donations to come back once the current uncertainty regarding the Democratic Party presidential ticket was over. This comes weeks after Biden's lackluster debate performance on June 27th against a former president, Donald Trump. During the presidential debate, as we all know, Biden appeared to freeze, spoke with a hoarse voice, and had difficulty getting through his prepared closing statement. News of the frozen donations also comes a day after Biden held his solo press conference. And again, it reminds us what he said, called Kamala Harris Trump, and mistakenly introduced Zelensky as Vladimir Putin. And so there's trouble in paradise there. And finally, let's move to Israel now, because we've got some problems going on there, at least some bleeding hearts that are upset by Netanyahu's stance. Netanyahu's office denies report Israel's open to pull out from the Gaza-Egypt border. The prime minister's office insists, now this is interesting, the IDF will remain in the Philadelphia corridor after Reuters cites Egyptian sources that say installing surveillance equipment to prevent smuggling would lead to an IDF withdrawal. Now let's remember the situation here. 8-mile long corridor that borders Egypt and Israel, there in Gaza, the Gaza Strip, where the smuggling tunnels were built on, from Egypt to Gaza, Gaza to Egypt, where there's numerous ones there, very sophisticated ones, where armaments were smuggled in, people were smuggled in, money was smuggled in, all kinds of things were smuggled in, back and forth, because there was no one there to, watch these terrible things happen. This help allow Hamas to have the weapons that it has and to be able to fight Israel. And Israel, of course, recently going into Rafah or Rafah, has captured this area, has taken the Philadelphia corridor in its grasp, and has basically said, we are going to remain there. We can't let this happen again, because if we put, as we had the story yesterday, the Palestinian Authority there, that's like letting Hamas run it. So no, they want to stay there. And this is what Netanyahu has emphasized. And this has caused all these people in Israel, these bleeding hearts, oh, that's going to kill the hostage deal. You're making demands that aren't reasonable. Well, if you don't have some type of security there that you can count on, I'll tell you what you can count on is Hamas or some other group growing again militarily and have another October 7th attack on Israel. So anyway, Prime Minister's office called it complete fake news on a Friday report from Reuters that Israel's considering the option of withdrawing from the Gaza-Egypt border as part of a potential ceasefire deal. The news agency report, which cited two Egyptian sources and a third source familiar with the matter, said Israeli negotiators are discussing installing a high-tech electronic surveillance system in the so-called Philadelphia corridor. The report came a day after Prime Minister Netanyahu made a new demand, and his new demand, of course, was that Israel remain in control of the frontier in any deal. The Prime Minister insists that the Philadelphia corridor remains, of course, in Israel's control in any deal, and that is non-negotiable. It's one thing he supposedly told his team, this is non-negotiable. Now, despite the denial from the Prime Minister's office, two officials involved in the hostage talk told the Times of Israel that Israeli negotiators have in fact been discussing the possibility of an IDF withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor as part of the ceasefire deal. It will be part of an arrangement to see Egypt, with the help of the U.S. and other international partners, bolster the border to ensure Hamas cannot smuggle weapons into Gaza from Sinai, the officials said. And so the arrangement would include some type of construction of an underground wall along the corridor to neutralize the tunnel threat, they added. Now, the question of whether IDF forces remain on the border is one of the issues blocking a potential hostage ceasefire deal, with both the Palestinian terror group Hamas and Egypt, a mediator in the talks, are opposed to Israel keeping its forces there. So that's where we're off now. And of course, many of the people in Israel are shouting that he's trying to ruin the hostage deal. He's trying to upset it. He doesn't want the hostage deal. He wants a continual war. No, what he wants is Hamas to be destroyed, so there won't be any October 7th happening again. And you've got to thoroughly, thoroughly destroy it. Okay, so what do we have? We have confusion reigning in both the U.S. and Israel. We know that Israel is going to survive because the Bible tells us, but there are no guarantees with the United States. Elections do have consequences. Now, this is why we always zero in first on what the Bible has to say about the future. We know that it gives us the only trustworthy roadmap of what's going to take place in the future. And we are trusting that you are taking time to study about it, to think about it, and to examine what the Bible has to say, because it will bring confidence in your heart, in your life, and knowledge that everything is going right according to pattern, what God has said. It's like a big puzzle that we have in the Bible where various passages, various prophets spoke at various times and talked about the future. And then what we do, we look at the various things, we put them together in context, we come up with an overall picture of what's going to happen at the time of the end. And this is not something we're just doing now. This is something that's been done for the last 2,000 years. And yet now is the first time this scenario has actually happened. We see the players exactly where we expect them to be at the time of the end. So it's an exciting time to be alive. So please take advantage of what we have written here on our website, Educating Our World. It's all free downloads of 12 books on Bible prophecy, including our book, 25 Signs We're Near the End, The Final Antichrist, the Jews, Jerusalem, the Coming Temple. And we have also one called God Wants Us to Know the Future, an introduction to Bible prophecy, explaining the subject. Again, everything is free downloads. And we have 10 other subjects there that part of our 65 book arsenal that you can use, study, take advantage of, and learn about what we believe as Christians, why we believe it, and how to live the Christian life. All right, until next time, I'm Don Stewart. Thank you so much for watching. And until then, may the Lord, as always, richly, richly bless.